All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining our webisode. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. We do have a Q&A feature on today's webisode. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter your questions, and I will be sure to get to them at the end of today's presentation. And if we don't, we'll make sure that we get you a response. But thank you again for joining our webisode today on goal setting. I am Kelly, a health services specialist at Geisinger, and with me today is Michael Murphy. Michael is a certified health coach at Geisinger within the Health and Wellness Department. He has a bachelor's degree in neuroscience and a master's degree in behavioral and decision sciences. Today, we're going to discuss the importance of goal setting, review strategies to overcome barriers, and identify the key components of a goal. I do like to note that all the information being provided today is to increase your awareness. It is not intended to be medical advice. Any specific questions you have about medical conditions, you should reach out to your physician. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today. Happy to be here.
Great. So I think goal setting is a skill set that we hear about across all aspects of our life, from, personal goals like losing weight to maybe professional goals in your career. Personally speaking, I can remember setting goals even at a young age in the different sports that I did. And it has just continued to be a skill that I apply in my life. So, to begin this conversation, can you explain why goal setting is so important, and can this skill truly be applied to all areas of our life?
Yeah, so goal setting, it provides someone with a measurable way to check in on their progress. It can help someone answer the question, how am I doing with whatever their goal is? And without one, it becomes really difficult to sense how much progress you're making. And I think to that second point there, yes, it certainly can be applied, I think, to nearly all areas of life. Of course, some areas are probably a bit more well suited to that than others. But in general, yes, I do think it can be applied to almost anything. And I think goals are almost always helpful as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I definitely have experience from setting them in sports to now setting them professionally. So I've set goals. I'm thinking most of us on today's call have probably set a goal at some point in our lives. But I'm wondering, what is the success rate for goal setting? Michael, do you have any statistics or insight into what percent of people actually achieve the goals that they set?
Yes, yeah. So I have looked into that, and the clearest answer I have is it depends. It does depend on what type of goal you're setting, what type of support system you have, and so on. But yeah, there are some statistics out there, and unfortunately, I'll start with the bad news. Unfortunately, for things like New Year's resolutions, I've seen numbers less than 10% of success rate. So, just in general, probably not super successful, at least for New Year's resolutions. But the good news is that we know a lot of things that can help. And so, in more controlled environments, in research studies where people were supported with their goals, the success rate can increase very dramatically. And I've seen success rates as high as 50 or even above 60%. So, yeah, if there's no support, chances are success might be low, but with the right tools available to you, a lot of people can be successful with their goal setting.
It's not necessarily, goal setting, that it's just making sure that we have the support, the strategies we're going to talk about to make it more successful. Um, so many of us might be setting our goals, which we know is important, but many of us may also on the same not be achieving our goals. So why do you think we aren't achieving our goals? Are there common patterns that you see that correlate with not achieving a goal?
Yeah, there are definitely a few common pitfalls that I notice with my health coaching participants. And a couple patterns hold true, at least in my work. And I would say for starters, one is maybe setting a goal that isn't specific enough. So a general goal is usually not going to bode well for like long-term success. So that's one. I would say a second would be not tracking progress regularly. Some people, we might have a goal to eat better. And if you're not tracking that in some way or getting more specific, that's also usually a common pitfall. And I would say also not having any short-term goals. So again, wanting to eat better, that is a great and admirable thing to want to strive for. But, how can you start doing that today or, tomorrow, rather than several weeks from now? And so, yeah, I would say those three things are pretty common challenges to success. So again, maybe not setting specific goals, not checking in with yourself regularly, and then also only having long-term goals and no short-term ones.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to hear that. Everyone, I feel like me personally, you want to set the big long-term one, but having those shorter term to get you there seem to be a benefit. So far we've kind of identified the benefits of goal setting. We've also discussed the downfalls of goals that unfortunately don't lead to success. So let's shift gears and focus now on the characteristics that make an effective goal. What would you say the key ingredients are to setting a goal?
Yeah, there are several. That's a good thing. There's a lot we can do about this. So, the first and foremost, and this is a tried and true tactic that you've probably heard of before, but that would be the SMART goal framework. So that's an acronym if you haven't heard of it, and it's a way to create a very effective goal. So the way you craft it matters a lot. And that stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So those are really helpful ways to craft a goal that will allow you to check in with yourself. And so again, that's a SMART goal. So that's a big one. Again, a common one that you've probably heard of. And then within that, I would say making sure that you're picking a goal that is genuinely interesting and exciting to you. A lot of the people that I work with will oftentimes get inspiration for their goal from external sources, like a lab reading from their doctor advising them to do X, Y, and Z, their spouse advising them to do X, Y, and Z. And so I just like to call out the R in the SMART goal framework. So making sure that it really is relevant to you and something that feels important. It should feel like your own goal, right? And then one quick other pointer I'd add in there would be just to make it social in some way. It doesn't have to be any fancy program. It could be, sharing your goal with a spouse, a friend, a health coach, or really anyone else who can support you.
Those are some great tips. I think the one that resonated with me is, kind of like you said, the R, the relevant. Like, how many times are you setting a goal for somebody else, something else, besides what makes sense or what you're interested in. So hopefully, others on the call, that resonates with you as well. Um, but good to, like you mentioned, explore all of those factors when you're setting a goal and really getting more specific. So now, T up, we got a question. What did the T stand for again, Michael, in SMART?
So T is time bound, meaning that there is basically a deadline. So, if your goal is to, eat a salad with your dinner every night, when are you going to do that by, essentially? So, yeah, and I'll just repeat the whole thing again. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and then again, the T is time bound.
Great. Thank you. Great question. Um, you know, when I think back to some of the goals I've set, the vague goals, losing weight, exercising more, like drinking more water. Definitely I can see now that my commitment wasn't there. I wasn't as successful. So really hearing how those um those variables we need to consider are important. So, in doing my research for today's conversation, I came across some different strategies for setting yourself up for success, like writing your goal down, finding an accountability partner. Um, do you think these strategies really work? And are there any other strategies you would recommend?
I do think they work. And with a lot of the health coaching participants that I work with, a lot of the ones who find success, do tend to do these things, like writing it down and getting some sort of accountability partner. A health coach, would be a built-in accountability partner. So that's already off to a good start there if you're working with a health coach. But yeah, when it comes to writing it down, I think it forces you to get specific with the goal and it makes it real in a sense. You're adding a tangible object with your goal written down, right? Whether that's a sticky note, something in your journal, and it kind of boosts your commitment in my mind. When you write it down, it almost feels like a contract with yourself. So, yeah, I think that's a very wise strategy to write it down. And then again, when it comes to accountability partners, that's so helpful because when we share that with someone, of course, we don't want to let ourselves down, but sometimes people feel even more pressure in a way to not let others down. When we tell our coworker we're going to walk before work Monday through Friday, we want to be successful, of course, but we also don't want to let them down either. So it adds in a nice element of some peer pressure, so to speak, some healthy social pressure. So I'm a big fan of both of those strategies.
Great. Now, I personally, I am a planner, but some things I have to accept that even sometimes the most detailed, the most well-planned plans don't go the way we had envisioned. Things happen, circumstances change, barriers come up, and that, a planner like myself, that can be frustrating, especially when you're working towards a goal. So would you say it's normal to experience barriers? And if so, what are some of the common ones that somebody may encounter?
Definitely. Yes, we have all been there. If we haven't been there, we will be. That's kind of just a fact of life and goal setting for sure. So yes, it's absolutely normal. Life will happen. And I would go a step further to even say that, they're not just normal, but they're to be expected. They should be planned for and to some extent even embraced, because again, it's just really unrealistic to not anticipate them coming up at some point. Um, and then the common ones I see generally boil down to stress and fatigue. Again, life happens, we become ill, we have changes to our work schedules, we face injuries, and even like surprise expenses. So these are all things that can really increase our levels of stress and fatigue. And those often don't bode well with our goals, right? Because after a long day at work, when you had to work late, who feels like exercising? So again, we've all been there. And so kind of crafting your goals with those barriers in mind, I think goes a long way. So if you can pick a goal that you can do even on those days where you are a little stressed or tired, it can really help.
Yeah, I think what you said about like planning for them. So, kind of checking in when you're planning for the goal, like you just said, like on those days that you're tired, can you still do X action that you said? So I think that's really helpful. I feel like, though, more of the standard is that when somebody's faced with a barrier, they just give up on their goal, their plan altogether. How do we change that? So, when it comes to facing an obstacle, what are some strategies that we can utilize to overcome these barriers versus just giving up?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. And you're right, a lot of people do tend to give up. Back to that New Year's resolution statistic. Sometimes it's less than 10% of people are successful. But again, the good news is there's a lot we can do about it. So, whenever someone encounters a barrier, I think to start, we all owe ourselves some kindness here when we fall short. And our self-talk, how we treat ourselves, how we talk to ourselves really matters here. And I think that's a really big ingredient that will determine whether we'll give up. So just giving yourself some kindness and telling yourself that it will be okay. And there's always tomorrow. There's always an opportunity to try again. And, during a health coaching call, when that happens, we'll also spend a lot of time just reassessing, the plan itself and thinking, was that goal unrealistic? Maybe I had this thought in mind, but when I went, to try it out, it didn't quite work well for X, Y, and Z reason. And so we'll just acknowledge that, we'll reassess. And then we also spend a lot of time just thinking about how far someone has come, even if they have faced a barrier, because a lot of times people are making more progress than they give themselves credit for. So I think that goes a long way to prevent giving up, just being kind to yourself and taking stock of the wins you've already had. When it feels like you might not have many, chances are you have more than you think. And then another strategy to, I think, prevent giving up would be just having backup plans. So like we said, barriers are to be expected. Things will probably go wrong. So just building in those plan Bs is also really helpful, especially for goals like outdoor exercise or walking. It's going to rain, it's going to snow, so be prepared for that and have some backup plans. And I think that almost forces you in a way to, rather than give up, it allows you to continue building momentum using your backup plan rather than doing nothing at all.
Yeah, kind of like, you know, reconvene, redirect yourself versus giving up. And I love the tip there on giving yourself grace. I think we are our toughest critics sometimes and overly hard on ourselves. So yeah, great advice. So I think another factor, at least in my mind, that plays a part in goal setting is motivation. But to me, motivation, it comes, it goes. You might be highly motivated to exercise ahead of a big event, but kind of once that event passes, your motivation plummets. Michael, can you talk a little bit about motivation? How does it play a role in goal setting? Is it something we should rely on or consider when setting our goals?
Yeah, great point. Yeah, motivation certainly does come and go. I've experienced that personally, and I think we all have. So, yeah, I think for that reason, just the fact that it does vary, over time probably means it shouldn't be the only thing we rely on. I think it's very helpful for in a few ways, but like you said, it's probably something that won't be at 100% all the time. So, again, there are some ways I think it's important. I think for one reason, but just the fact that it can be the spark or the motivation to the precursor, rather, to get someone to think of what their goal might be. So motivation, when it's high, that can result in someone writing down their goal for the first time. It can prompt someone to think of what their goals might be, or even go as far as to sign up for like a new gym membership, sign up to work with a health coach, and so on. So I think motivation can be a precursor in that way. It can get people started. And even if it doesn't persist, I think having some motivators handy, a list of them somewhere, or just keeping in mind what motivates you can be helpful when it's time to reset your focus and to rethink of your approach. Like we said, chances are we all encounter barriers. So when that does happen, having your motivators handy can help reinforce your goal and help you get started again. So yeah, I do think motivation can be helpful to get started, but also to refocus and reinforce your plan.
Yeah, that's helpful and not to solely rely on that for the times when we're not as motivated.
Exactly. Yep.
So I know you've mentioned already a little bit about long-term and short-term goals. I can definitely think back to experiences that I've set goals that are a year or more out and some goals that are only a month or so out. Can you talk a little bit more about short-term and long-term goals? Is one more effective than the other? What are the benefits that they each offer?
Great question. Yeah, I think both are really important because I think we all want something to strive for. And we also want to keep ourselves busy, today, right? So we kind of enjoy having both types of goals. Um, If I had to say, at least in my work as a coach, when I'm checking in with people every few weeks, I think the short-term goals are a little bit more effective, again, if I had to choose between the two, just because they help build a sense of momentum and urgency. And, we can't run a marathon without running a mile first, right? So I really like to focus on the short-term goals with the people that I work with. Um, and this brings up a really important distinction, I think, between the different types of goals that there are. I think to start, many of us have an outcome goal. And an outcome goal is usually around like a metric. I want to lower my A1C or I want to lower my blood pressure. So, those outcome goals are naturally going to be long-term goals. Unfortunately, those aren't things we can really change overnight. They're more like big picture goals. And they're also not behaviors, right? We can't just decide to lower our A1C. That's not a goal or behavior that we can do today. And that really lends itself to the importance, I think, of the more short-term goals. Sometimes they're also called process goals or the things that you can do day to day to start building your progress. They're things like I will double my vegetable intake at dinner, or I will start taking my diabetes medication on time every day and so on. Those are more of the behaviors that you can do immediately that ultimately lead up to those important outcomes that we're looking for. Again, like lowering A1C, for example. So yeah, to me, the short-term goals are really the fuel that is required for long-term success.
Yeah, so it sounds like they both play a different role and are good to include and work towards. So,
Absolutely.
this is a health and wellness call. So, trying to, tie our conversation to that. So, like when I think about some common health and wellness goals that I hear people making, like losing weight, exercising more, I feel like many of us jump in all into a very rigid diet, a very structured exercise routine. And while that might yield some quick results, they don't seem sustainable. So what are your thoughts on this? Is there a better approach people should take?
Yes, there is, absolutely. And I think you've touched on something that the coaching team values greatly, which is setting yourself up for sustainable success. A lot of those really intense or strict and rigid programs, like with diet or exercise, for example, they promise really quick fixes. They can solve every condition you have in just a week. And as you know, those things don't really work. And even if it did work, let's say there was a perfect exercise or diet plan for you, what good is that if you can't stick with it because it's so strict, right? So, yeah, this is something that we're constantly talking about, among like the coaching team, but also when we work with participants, choosing goals that are sustainable and realistic over time. So yeah, that would be a better approach in my view. And a lot of the things that we set goals around, even if they're small, they will offer immediate health benefits. Just walking a little bit more, sleeping a little bit more, reducing your tobacco use. These are all things that can actively promote health. And so we want to do that as many times as possible throughout the day for as long as possible. So yeah, we're a big fan of sustainable goals rather than those strict, rigid programs that people can't really keep up with.
Yeah, and kind of like you mentioned, we shouldn't just be focusing on our health, for a week that diet or that exercise plan works. It's really, like you said, it's a whole life, a sustainable approach that we need to take. So, we're nearing the end here, and we've definitely covered a lot in our time together. So, I usually like to end with some action steps that our listeners can take. So, as we begin to wrap up today's conversation, what would you say your top three tips or pieces of advice would be for individuals who are, considering setting a goal or working on a goal?
Yeah, so first and foremost, like we mentioned earlier, number one for me would be to choose a goal that is genuinely interesting or exciting to you, even a little bit, just going taking that time to make it feel like it's your goal, I think goes a long way. So that would be number one. Number two would be to set up regular check-ins with yourself. It does not have to be fancy. It can be, journaling about your exercise plan for 5 minutes a week, just taking inventory, taking stock of, how things are going and doing that consistently. And again, number three would be just be kind to yourself. Change is really hard. If it were easy, my job would not exist. So, just try to embrace the ups and downs that come with goal setting, just try to have, compassion to yourself as well as a growth mindset.
I love that. Those are some great tips that resonated with me for sure. Um, and they'll definitely help me as I, pursue my future goal setting. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of today's call, Michael is a health coach with us. So, can you, with our final few minutes together, I was hoping you'd be able to provide us a little overview of health coaching. What is it? Who's it for? How does somebody sign up?
Absolutely. Yeah. So health coaching is really for people who are looking, like you said, to make lifestyle changes to improve their health and well-being. We like to emphasize that it's a very collaborative process. So, as you can imagine, it includes a lot of goal setting. That's really like the cornerstone of it, and accountability. It is important to know that there are some things we can't do, so with our scope, we're not going to diagnose anything. We cannot prescribe treatments. We don't help people manage their medications. And we also don't provide psychological, like therapeutic interventions. So there are a couple of points there, around our scope, things we can't do. But I think that said, there's so many people that can benefit from coaching, even the coaches ourselves. We joke all the time that we need to do health coaching as well. And so it's really a program to help you build upon the skills that you already have. A lot of this too is about gaining confidence in your ability to reach your own goals independently. So if we do our job well, we're kind of put ourselves out of business, so to speak. Um, and then just one last point too, it is really important that participants are setting their own goals and, actively participating. And we also want to make sure that if there is an unmanaged medical condition or a condition that's preventing someone from safely participating in the program, those are signs that coaching might not be appropriate at this time. So we just like to make sure that any major clinical needs are met first before working with a health coach on lifestyle changes. But again, for the most part, it is a great program for pretty much everyone. And to get started, it's pretty easy to sign up. You can contact the Health and Wellness Department. You can give us a call at 866-415-7138, and I'm sure that will go out if anyone needs to have that repeated. And we also have an email, that's wellness@geisinger.edu.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for joining us today, for sharing your tips with us. Thank you to all of those who tuned in. We hope you found this information helpful and useful and relatable. We do have like 1 minute for questions. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A um, function tab chat. But if you think of questions later on, you're always welcome to email us at wellness@geisinger.edu, and I'll get those questions over to Michael, and we'll get back to you. So I'm just going to pause here. Not seeing any new questions coming in. But like I said, don't hesitate to reach out with any questions that might come up later. And be sure to join us next month for our well-being webisode. That is going to focus on dental health and its link to overall well-being. But once again, thank you, everyone. We hope you have a great day.
Thank you.